Well, welcome to the latest Parchment and Paper video from the Centre for Manuscript and Text Cultures. And we're here in the vault in the Queen's College Library with Felix Taylor, who's a library assistant here. And we're going to be talking about the latest exhibition which Felix has curated, which is in the upper library, about dialects. And Felix is going to tell us about that. The exhibition is called Cumberland Talk, which is the word for Cumberland, I suppose, in the local dialect.
Yes, it's called Cumberland Talk. Cumberland Talk. It's basically a celebration of quite a large donation that the college library received from one of its old members, Dr. Douglas Bridgewater, who was here in the 1950s, and he began collecting books on the Lake District in the 1960s. So it was quite a sizable donation.
And indeed, we can see it behind us here. That's exactly why we've chosen to come here.
So yes, the exhibition is basically about dialects from Lancashire and the historic counties of Cumberland and Westmoreland, or what is now the county of Cumbria.
And of course, the college has a long-standing connection with the area. The founder, Robert Egglesfield, his family was from there, and in the 18th century, I think, a large bequest, and indeed, before that, a lot of the members of the college, the fellows of the college, came from there, and students over the years as well.
Yes, exactly. It was actually written into the founding constitution that the college was to provide for scholars from Cumberland and Westmoreland due to the poverty of that region.
Which is something that continues to this day. We have links with the area. So what was the reason for alighting on dialect in particular? Is that something there was a particular interest to you, or that the collection supports?
It wasn't exactly a specific interest of mine. I was, as library assistant, it was sort of one of my duties to go through most of the books and process them, and I kept coming across these books about the dialects, especially glossaries, and these turned out to be quite fascinating. And I'm an ex-student of English literature, so I was more drawn to the poetical side of things, and I noticed that a lot of the poetry was actually written in the dialect of the 18th and 19th centuries.
And it seemed to open up a rich and interesting seam of textual history, where antiquaries and others are collecting these words, these nuggets, and producing glossaries and so on in the back of poetry books, but also separate glossaries as well.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of gives an idea of how these kinds of dialects were being presented and read by the literary public at the time, I suppose.
Yeah, and the chronology, or the time period, we should probably say, is largely late 18th through to the 19th century.
Yeah, I would say late 18th, sort of on the cusp of the Romantic movement, ending, I suppose, at the end of the 19th, but there is still interest in local dialect, even though it is a dying tongue, I suppose.
Yeah, and I know that some of the books you were thinking about were from more recent poets who may not write in dialect, but use particular words to really ground and locate those poems.
Yes, exactly.
So what did you discover during your time curating this exhibition? What was new and surprising?
Well, I had an idea already that the various dialects from this area had sort of quite an interesting history in terms of etymology and where the words came from. I knew that there were sort of Celtic ancestry, I suppose, Norse, Irish words in there, and I didn't know the actual intensity of the words that still survived, even to this day, in terms of landscape words and place names, words for farming, that kind of thing. They all come from a specific period of Norse migration in about the 9th or 10th centuries. People from Scandinavia coming over from the Isle of Man or Ireland and settling in the area, and their language sort of stamped onto the region.
It's interesting. So something that might seem local actually is more nationalism isn't quite the right word, but
yes. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a unique area in that respect. It's got, as I said, it's got Scandinavian, Celtic. There were tribes speaking a form of Brythonic that became a version of Old Welsh. So it's quite a diverse area in that respect.
So the exhibition wandered into linguistics and historical linguistics as well.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And needed maps to illustrate it. And did you find?
Yes, there are a couple of books in there that give an idea of how many place names in Cumberland and Westmoreland that have Norse-related names. Yeah.
And there's some poets that you particularly found used dialect as part of their work, ones that really made use of that.
Yes, there were a couple that stood out. There was one poetess named Susanna Blamire, who was also known as the Muse of Cumberland, and she lived in the end of the 18th century, died in 1790 something. None of her work was actually published in her lifetime, but when it was collected in the early 1800s, it went on to inspire people like Byron and John Stagg, the Romantic movement, and one of her poems is mentioned in a Dickens novel, I think, The Old Curiosity Shop. Yes. So then there's John Stagg himself, who's quite a big name in the poetry scene, and you've got people writing in dialect to this day, particularly in the 20th century.
Right. So it's a living tradition that to some extent emerges from these collected works to some extent, or these.
Yeah, I think that's right, and people are still trying to, even though it is in decline, people are still trying to preserve it in literature.
Well, thank you, Felix. Hopefully we'll have a few images of the exhibition as well, mixed into this video. And we look forward to seeing you at the next instalment of Parchment and Paper.